It's critical for American business people to understand that the very best way to waste both time and money in Brazil is to not take the time to get to know the people you're thinking of doing business with, to think that you can keep a trip to Brazil short and efficient, or to take the attitude that all you have to do is be a little patient and put a little extra time in up front, and after that, business in Brazil will take care of itself. It's very important in Brazil that you dress right and have a sense of personal style. And the more you understand about Brazil, the more you'll appreciate why this is the case. I mentioned earlier that a 2-week total immersion language course would be one of the best upfront investments an American could make. Well, so is a new wardrobe, unless you already have a good collection of European-styled, natural fiber suits, shirts, neckties, and shoes. It'll also pay off big time for you to have a manicure and a good haircut before leaving for Brazil. Please don't reject this as a superficial recommendation or any kind of a reflection on how you may normally dress. You might be amazed, unless you've done business in places like Paris or Milan, how much emphasis some cultures can put on how you dress as a measure of your desirability as a business associate. But it's quite true that in Brazil, anything less than a fashionable personal style may very well eliminate access to certain higher levels of business and social circles. So if your business involves calling on business people and impressing them not only with your presentation, but with your personal qualities, be aware that how you are dressed will form a large part of that judgment of you in Brazil.
The fashion is a little bit different. The average American would probably dress with 1 or 2 suits, gray or blue or black, with a basic white shirt and a white tie, and Johnson & Murphy's, and then they're ready to go. But the men in Brazil I find to be very fashion conscious with the linen suits and the maybe not a tie, or if it's a tie, it's a very high fashion tie, not just a plain blue and black color, but maybe a yellow or green or something a little bit more fashionable. And just to home in on how important that is, my account took me to the mall, and this is a young man, took me to the mall and showed me where he shops, and his wife shops for him, and I thought that was very unusual to take a business partner to something like that, but they do put a lot of emphasis on fashion, and the same goes for women. Some women here in the United States can be very staunch blue suits with a high collar white shirt, and not very appealing at all, but men in Brazil like for their women to look good. And I think that, just because we were Americans going over there, I don't think that we need to wear our skirts, all the way up here, but, relax a little bit and add a little bit more fashion to your business wardrobe, and I think you'll be a really big hit.
Even people going to Brazil on temporary work assignment need to pay attention to this strong dress orientation of Brazilian society when it comes to matter of personal style. For example, in the U.S., it's quite common for office and technical people, such as engineers, to work in short-sleeve casual shirts. If you're going to Brazil to do anything which requires the respect of your fellow workers or associates, you should probably take mostly long-sleeve dress shirts, unless you know for a fact that you're going to be in a shirt-sleeve environment. And even then, take along a few long-sleeve dress shirts, because there'll be occasions when you'll need them. Formality and concern about appearance and status aren't limited to the upper levels of business in Brazil. It's not at all uncommon for regular people like store clerks and office workers to spend an enormous proportion of their salaries on the most fashionable clothing they can afford. Conversational skills are very important in Brazil, but even if you don't think of yourself as a particularly adept socializer, you don't have to worry. The key to successful conversation in Brazil is how well you ask questions and the amount of interest you show while listening. The first thing you'll notice in Brazilian conversations is that once a relationship is established, the people involved stand close together, touch each other frequently, hold each other's gaze for extended periods, and speak rapid fire, appearing to interrupt each other frequently. This animated style comes naturally to most Brazilians, even the most conservative, formal people you will meet first in their offices. When Brazilians are in relaxed surroundings with family and friends, they're almost uniformly animated, vivacious, and energetic people. Just keep in mind, in case you've forgotten, Brazilians are not Latinos or Hispanics. So forget what you think you know about the so-called Latin American personality, even if the Brazilian style I've just been describing sounds suspiciously familiar. While there are superficial comparisons, and even a few good ones, to be made between Brazilian attitudes, values, business practices, and lifestyles, and those of prominent Latin American countries like Mexico, Chile, Argentina, and Colombia, the fact is that Brazilians see themselves as completely different than any of the Spanish-speaking people, and resent North Americans who, whether intentionally or not, imply that such differences either do not exist or aren't important.
Interestingly enough, when I was in Sao Paulo, I ran into a situation like that with two women managers. However, their language was not even Spanish, it was French. And when I figured that out and we switched to French instead, then I got a kick out of it, because the other people I was with, one happened to be Swiss and the other happened to be Belgian, and we all spoke French, all of us, as our second language, and we actually wound up in Sao Paulo speaking French as the second language, because that was the only means of mutual communication that we had. But again, it's a courtesy. It was a mutual courtesy that we extended to one another so that we could communicate and that we could conduct business.
When Brazilians come to the U.S. on business, many have learned to at least ask about either the hometown baseball team or football team. And they also know that helps if they know a little bit about the World Series and the Super Bowl. Why have Brazilians concluded this? Because, for the most part, Americans begin business conversations on one of several highly predictable subjects. It's our culture. And of course, it's the same thing in Brazil. Only in Brazil, football is what we call soccer. It's a national passion with a full hierarchy of heroes, villains, losers and winners, big plays and big mistakes, which send this country of hundreds of millions of people collectively reeling in either joy or anguish, depending upon the game and the stakes. So here is a major business strategy hint. Does anyone in your family play soccer? Maybe a niece or a nephew in grade school? If so, be sure to carry a picture of them and be ready to brag, politely, about them. In fact, be ready to say something warm and proud and affectionate about each member of your family, and learn to drop these little tidbits of sentiment into your business conversations. You'll know when the moment is right. It'll be when your Brazilian associate is doing the same thing. A person who does not carry pictures of his or her family and have affectionate stories to tell about them is beyond comprehension as far as most Brazilians are concerned. If you're going to be in Brazil even only a short time, set up pictures of your family in your temporary office or in your hotel room. Family ties are critically important for Brazilians, and most Brazilians will feel much more comfortable dealing with a person who they know cares for their family than they would feel dealing with a person who they know doesn't care for their family or who they're unsure of. Don't forget that other cultures have stereotypes of Americans, as well as us having stereotypes of them. And the stereotype of the uncaring, cold, divorcing, alienated American is a strongly held image in the minds of many Brazilians. Don't give your potential associates any reason to apply that stereotype to you. Another area in which basic conversational preparation will pay big dividends is the area of international trends and politics. Brazilian business people are sophisticated observers of the world scene and love to discuss politics. An average Brazilian business person is very aware of current events in Europe, Asia, Latin America, and North America. For an American business visitor to be unable to respond to a current events question with at least a comment and a return question would be considered inept, to say the least. Now, there's a simple and relatively enjoyable solution, even if you don't have the time to normally read the entire newspaper cover to cover. The solution is to subscribe to a magazine called The Economist, which isn't what it sounds like at all, in case you're not familiar with it. Quite simply, it's the single best short-form information access you can have to the world of international events and trends. I'll make you a promise. If you spend 1 hour each week for 4 weeks before you leave for Brazil or any other country reading what The Economist has to say about what's going on in that country, You will never be at a loss for intelligent things to say in any business or social conversation you have while you're in country. Americans don't have the history of military and financial intervention in Brazil that we do with some other key business partners in our hemisphere, such as Mexico. But the real edge for Americans comes from our cultural inclination to be relaxed, friendly people with a genuine interest in others.
American products and Americans in general are very, very welcome in Brazil. And I think one of the things that's interesting when U.S. companies go abroad, often they have this reverse ugly American mentality, and in fact they're somewhat quiet and shy about who they are, what their company is, where they're from. For example, in a place like Brazil, it's got a big country mentality. Texans and Texas products are extremely welcome in Brazil. Why? Because in a sense there's a common heritage there in the sense of this big country mentality. Brazilians love the concept of the West, the Wild West. They love the concept of Texas. And it's a special welcome. I think at a minimum, Americans and American ideas and products are welcome in Brazil, but when you put into that the Texas factor, they're really welcome.
Most of us have to train ourselves not to waste other people's time, not to intrude with personal questions, and not to impose on friends. These things don't come naturally to us because, by nature, we're some of the world's friendliest people. Well, here's the good news. All those things which we have to try hard not to do in the U.S. are the very things that'll work best for us in Brazil. Waste a friend's time in conversation? That's impossible. Intrude by asking about their family, their personal interests, their opinions? Hardly. Not impose on a friend? Well, what are friends for if not to impose on? Keep in mind that Brazil is a society where every person's social position, status, family, reputation, image, and authority are all kept in very conscious balance with that of others, including friends, colleagues, competitors, and even enemies. How you treat each individual person in such an environment is of extreme importance to everyone, precisely because of the consciousness with which things like power, respect, authority, and status are balanced and maintained. Just keep in mind it's important that you make time for everyone who seems the least bit ready to interact with you, and take your cues from how Brazilian colleagues treat people in subordinate positions within their own environment. It's very important to understand that in Brazil, you will encounter many people who will think, act, and feel differently than you do about even such simple things as the casualness of an agreement or the level of obligation that's created by doing someone a favor. You can prepare yourself to deal effectively with this level of ambiguity by reading as much history, literature, and current events material as possible, by talking to as many people with Brazilian experiences as possible, and by involving yourself in international business activities here in the U.S. as much as possible. More than this, you can understand and keep in mind that cultural differences are never a good reason for making a bad deal. If you do your homework, get good advice, take your time, and invest in serious personal preparation up to and including in-country immersion language training, then you're going to be able to deal very effectively with the differences you'll inevitably encounter by applying a combination of respectful understanding and business intelligence. Throughout the video, I've been making reference to the Brazilian preference for working things out, for finding a clever solution, for avoiding confrontation, and seeking resolution and reconciliation rather than simple problem solving. Let's discuss a few of the ways in which Brazilians apply culturally distinctive approaches to the process of doing a workaround of a problem.
The person in Brazil, the despachante, is going to be very effective for you, but more importantly, is going to save your life when it comes to making negotiations. When you walk into a meeting room and you're going to have the people from finance, the people from legal, the key executives, and then all the decision makers along the way, you're going to want to know not only what their hot buttons are business-wise, but how to break through the ice and really get down to a level where you're talking to them as people rather than as this one organization. That person, or what I would almost call as the executive assistant in that firm, or the clinger from MASH attitude, is They're going to know who to talk to. They're going to know what hot buttons to use. If you're going to talk to Joao about the distribution agreement, well, just don't bring up that last company because he was burned by them, and that's going to make you look very bad. So they're going to give you competitive intelligence on who you're doing business with and really how to be effective in any situation.